and welcome to Rulebreaker. Today we're going to take a look at the Nomad faction from Prophecy of Kings for Twilight Imperium 4th edition. So these guys they seem to be kind of like the police of the galaxy. They're goody two-shoes. They like to send agents around, that's their thing. They're like a leader-focused faction, and they like flagships, as you'll see in a little while. So without further ado, let's get into what they get at the start of the game. So they start with one of the new Prophecy of Kings specific technologies, the Sling Relay, which reads: Action. Exhaust this card to produce one ship in any system that contains one of your space docks. Normally this is a sort of second stage technology, but they get it right at the start of the game. I really like this technology. It allows you to do a full production in a system, and then you can use this to build another ship later, which is pretty cool. As long as you can fit it in with your fleet limit, that's totally cool. So it gives you a chance to not worry too much about production limits and that sort of stuff early in the game, which is an interesting start. They have a very different starting units here. They've got a flagship right at the start of the game. They have a carrier, a destroyer, 3 fighters, 4 infantry, and a space dock. Alright, so here is the Nomad's home system of Arcturus, which Twilight Imperium 3rd edition fans may recognise. This is an awesome planet, 4/4. I think, off the top of my head, that might be the best pound for pound total resources and influence combined cost in the game, making it a really, really cool starter planet to have, which is fantastic. You're probably going to need it. Sitting in there ominously is their flagship, Memoria, which we'll talk about in a minute. Just looking at this starting setup, you've got your carrier, you've got a whole bunch of small units like infantry and fighters, and because you've got capacity on your flagship, you can go in multiple directions right from the very start, which is great. Alright, so taking a look at these guys in more detail, as you can see, fulfilling their goody two-shoes persona with their quote, "The future must be preserved at all costs," the Nomad. So there you go. They've got 2 abilities. The first one, the Company, which reads: during setup, take the 2 additional Nomad faction agents and place them next to your faction sheet. You have 3 agents. So that actually gives you a total of 5 leaders in the game, which is 2 more than anybody else. And that's their get-up, is having options when it comes to the leaders. We'll talk about those a little bit later on. Their other ability, Future Sight, which reads: during the agenda phase, after an outcome you voted for or predicted is resolved, gain a trade good. So it's in your interest to predict things with riders and vote for things, because you get trade goods in return. That's a little bit of compensation for spending votes, spending influence in the agenda phase, which is nice. It's nice to feel like you can get something back for having a voice in the Galactic Senate, which is good. They have 4 commodities, which is relatively high, one of the highest in the game, so they have a tendency towards trading and helping out other people. Now, regarding units, the Nomad have a standard setup all the way across the board, and they have a different type of flagship, a flagship that you can upgrade. So let's take a look at that in a little bit more detail. Alright, so looking a little closer at Memoria, your flagship that you get at the start of the game. I think the only faction that gets that. So let's take a look at the ability here. It reads: you may treat this unit as if it were adjacent to systems that contain one or more of your mechs. So if you think about it, really what they're doing there is they're turning mechs into like mini wormholes for your flagship. So you can make connections across the board in ways that you desire, really. You obviously have to have been there before in order to put a mech down, but you can create a network of like traveling around quickly and easily if you have mechs and Memoria out at the same time. On top of this, they have sustained damage and also anti-fighter barrage. This is an anti-fighter barrage with 3 dice, hitting on 8s, which is pretty good. It comes as a standard cost of 8, hitting on 7s with 2 dice, with 1 move and 3 capacity. Now, unlike anybody else, one of their faction technologies is actually an upgrade for Memoria, the flagship. It costs a green, a blue and a yellow, remembering that you start with a blue already at the start of the game. So, you know, you're well on your way to doing this if you want. It could only take, you could get it in round 1, you could get it in round 2, depending if you're focusing on that or not. And the difference here is you may treat this unit as if it was adjacent to systems that contain one or more of your mechs. Again, same as before. The anti-fighter barrage now hitting on 5s with 3 dice, which is brilliant. And then much better stats. Similar cost of 8, hitting on 5s with 2 dice, a move of 2 and a capacity of 6. So you'll be able to haul a lot of stuff around, like maybe those mechs that we were talking about a moment ago. Dropping them around the galaxy, destroying fighters on your way, blowing stuff up. Yeah, very serviceable flagship. I think it's pretty good. Alright, so their first unit technology was a souped up spacecraft. Their other one is a bit different. It is a temporal command suite, which reads, after any player's agent becomes exhausted, you may exhaust this card to ready that agent. If you ready another player's agent, you may perform a transaction with that player. Okay, so agents are exhausted when they're used, and then they can't be used again for the rest of that round. They unexhaust at the end of the round and then they become available again. In the case of the Nomad's ability here, you can immediately unexhaust an agent as soon as it's been exhausted. So the other player, if it's another player, chooses the timing of it, and then you can react with this ability. You can become a very powerful ally to somebody who has a good agent, for example, allowing you to do good deals with them. Because you've got 3 agents, this means that you can mix and match your turns in a very different way. We'll look at those in a moment, but you've got 3 options, so lots of options for tactics and strategy with this technology, and it's quite cheap. It's a single yellow prereq on it, so you can get it in pretty quickly, and let's be honest, you're going to want to do it because these guys love their leaders. And before we go into detail on that, let's just take a look at their promissory note. Their racial promissory note is called the Cavalry, and it reads, at the start of a space combat against a player other than the Nomad. So again, this is when you give this to somebody else, they have this ability. It reads, during this combat, treat one of your non-fighter ships as if it has the sustained damage ability, combat value, and anti-fighter barrage value of the Nomad's flagship. Wow. Return this card to the Nomad player at the end of combat. Now that flagship can be the standard version, or obviously the upgraded version, depending on which one you've got. So you can turn someone's non-fighter into a hitting on 5 with 2 dice, has anti-fighter barrage of 5s with 3 dice if it's the upgraded version, and with sustained damage. Pretty powerful. Interesting thing about this is at the very top it says, as the start of a space combat against a player other than the Nomad. Very risky, but super interesting as well. Alright, let's take a look at their additional units board, their leaders and mech. So as said earlier, these guys have lots of agents. They've got 3 different agents as well as the commander and the hero. So there are 3 agents. Let's look at them together. There's Field Marshal Mercer, there's the Tundarian, and Artuno the Betrayer. Then they also have the commander Navarch Fang and the hero Aiksil Stephen. So if you can tell just by looking at the artwork that the Nomad seem to be made up of members of lots of different factions that already exist in the game. Like this guy looks like a Hakan, this one looks sort of like an Argent Flight, this guy looks like one of the Ghosts of Creus, this looks like a Mahact, and I'm not sure who this one is, but so let's quickly look at the 3 different agents first of all. Field Marshal Mercer. At the end of a player's turn, you may exhaust this card to allow that player to remove up to 2 of their ground forces from the game board and place them on planets they control in the active system. So this is kind of like a little teleportation thing. Move 2 infantry or whatever, ground forces from the game board and put them wherever you want, as long as it's in the active system. So that would be on that player's turn. It can be you, or it can be an ally, or it can be an enemy as well. So think about it in that way too. It can be an aggressive move as well as a helpful move. The Thunderian has the ability, after the roll dice step of combat, you may exhaust this card. If you do, hits are not assigned to either player's units. Return to the start of the combat round's roll dice step. So like a big reset, big re-roll reset. Ignore the results of the dice and go again. So you can do this to really annoy somebody, which would sound like a lot of fun. And then the third agent is Artuno the Betrayer. When you gain trade goods from the supply, you may exhaust this card to place an equal number of trade goods on this card. When this card readies, gain the trade goods on this card. So that's a really obvious combo with your technology, the temporal command suite. So gain trade goods with the Artuno the Betrayer and exhaust them. Then exhaust your temporal command suite to ready Artuno the Betrayer, get the trade goods, and then you can even do it a second time in this phase, and then you'd get those trade goods when they're ready at the end of the round as well. So that's pretty interesting combo right there for trade goods. So a lot of flexibility with the agents there, as you can see. So on top of those, you've got your commander and your hero. The commander unlocks after you've scored a secret objective, and that can be any of the secret objectives, which, if anybody watching has played lots of Twilight Imperium, you know that they can be either super easy or frustratingly difficult sometimes. So once you've got one of those, you flip this over and it reads, you can produce your flagship without spending resources. So boom, there you go. That's a huge deal, particularly when you've got your upgraded version, Memoria 2. Not having to spend that 8 means it's a no-brainer to put it into the game. And you know, Nomad and their flagship, they love that. This Navarch Fang company shipmaster ability really enables that to come into its own. That's super good. And then the hero unlocks after 3 score objectives, just like any other hero. If you flip that over, it becomes the probability matrix with the action, place this card near the game board. Your flagship and units it transports can move out of systems that contain your command tokens during this game round. At the end of the game round, purge this card. So normally when you put a command token in a system and move ships in, those ships are locked in that system for the rest of the round until those command tokens are taken out and a new round starts and you can move them again. What this probability matrix is doing for a once per game ability, you can move those guys as long as they're with your flagship again and again and again in the same round, which is potentially devastating, seeing as flagship is what they do. And you know, you can rebuild it if you really want to. So that's really, really cool for the whole round. That's pretty powerful. It can make a massive difference to the game. And last but not least, their mech, Quantum Manipulator. It is a standard 2 cost 6 combat sustained damage mech with the ability, while this unit is in space area during combat, you may use its sustained damage ability to cancel a hit that is produced against your ship in this system. So that is like a sort of a mobile sustained damage thing for any ship that you've got. It's a single hit. It can be against any ship, whether that's a fighter, doesn't say non-fighter here, whether that's a flagship, whether it's any ship that normally has sustained damage or not. Making it pretty powerful, and one that will protect your Memoria 2, especially because you're going to want to be carrying these mechs around, creating that conduit that we talked about earlier, which makes these guys really, really, really strong at creating a network, which seems to be their thing, their leaders, their flagship, their mechs. Really cool. So there you go. The Nomad, they sort of feel like they get around better than the Ghosts of Creus even do with their wormhole technology. So something to keep an eye on there. A little race between those two. and similar colors as well. So that is the Nomad. They're pretty cool. I really like the idea of them. I think they're going to be a sleeper hit in the game as well. They're a bit subdued looking at the start, but once you start getting all of those different combos with the flagship and the mechs and the commander going, it's really, really cool. So that is the Nomad. 6 down, 1 to go. Next video will be the Mahact. Looking forward to that. See you then. This is Rulebreaker. Thanks for watching.